Waste! So, I want to talk about a feature of designing weapons for video games that I'm kind of obsessed with because it's very measurable and it'll feature in pretty much any damage system, any basic video game system where enemies are there, they have a certain amount of health, and you have a weapon that does a certain amount of damage, is likely to feature some kind of waste. And the phenomenon of waste is basically, if you imagine the enemy has 100 hit points and you have a bullet that does 200 damage, your bullet is twice as powerful as it needs to be, and you're kind of wasting 100 damage, and if you could distribute that damage differently, you would be more efficient at killing guys. You could potentially kill 2 guys with that damage, so you could have, like, shooting half a bullet at 2 guys, if you follow me, and all that. So it's all about, you've got a certain amount of damage, and how is that damage distributed, and how much of that damage is wasted. And designing the weapons for Super Space Galaxy got me to think about that stuff plenty, because those were the variables I was really working with. Depending on the variables, this can have actually quite nasty consequences for the in-practice effectiveness of your weapons. So imagine you had a weapon that does 100 damage and the enemy is already dying to 50 damage. On paper, that weapon does 100 damage, and you might even be paying for that 100 damage, or yeah, just buying it in some way with some kind of resource. But in practice, you might as well be doing 50 damage and it would do the same. So what would get around this is the weapon having a rate of fire that's twice as often. If it shoots twice as often, you could then shoot 2 50 damage bullets that would be more efficient and kill a guy every shot, so you could in practice kill people twice as fast, even though on paper your weapon's actual DPS is still just the same. And that, in a nutshell, is the, not quite the paradox, but certainly the phenomenon of waste, where damage that gets wasted just kind of disappears into nowhere, even if you paid for it. I kind of have this problem in Super Space Galaxy with the sniper shot, which is kind of deliberate, but whatever. The sniper shot is designed to shoot rarely, it shoots every 2 seconds, and the normal drone enemies are actually designed to die in about 1 second, so actually storing up twice as much damage as you need to kill them, but the weapon is still very slow to shoot another bullet, so there's a tremendous amount of waste in the sniper shot. This is kind of something I was prepared for, that the weapons in Super Space Galaxy are meant to be not necessarily rigorously fair, and I was happy to have some weapons be wasteful in some situations. If anything, I kind of wanted weapons to be efficient or inefficient in different situations. Now, obviously enough, weapons with a high rate of fire are going to have less waste, so I've got a weapon called the Vulcan Cannon that has a very high rate of fire, and it'll waste almost no damage. It shoots so often that guys just kind of die when it's their time to die immediately, and there's no waiting when you've actually stored up enough damage but you're not yet ready to unload it. But this is where rate of fire also causes another weird secondary kind of waste. So a weapon like the Vulcan Cannon that shoots very often isn't going to do much of the normal waste I've been talking about, but it will have another kind of waste where it's not designed to store up very much damage outside of battle. You only store, like, I don't know, 1/10 of a second or less of worth of damage outside the battle, so that when you go into a battle, you don't have a whole lot to shoot at the enemy before you kind of have to repeat the damage. So there's kind of waste going into the battle, whereas a weapon like the sniper shot, you're storing up 2 seconds worth of damage just outside the battle, and then the moment you go in, you've already got a bullet, and if there's a battle where there's one enemy, you might kill that one enemy pretty much immediately and be in a great situation for killing one guy at a time in fights like that. So these weapons that are slow to fire actually have an advantage in that they will store up more damage just outside of the battles. And I guess part of my point here is that this gets kind of complicated kind of fast. Like, if you're trying to keep a rigorous control of how your game works and how the weapons are balanced and everything, I think that may even be impossible, really, in a remotely interesting situation, because this is just a very simple thing where weapons have different amounts of damage per bullet, they have different rates of fire, but even here, in this really simple situation of just numbers hitting each other, the phenomenon of waste means that weapons can be better or worse depending on quite specific things about the situation, even with these very few variables at play. You might say that waste is minimized when your weapon fits the enemy well. So if I have a weapon that stores up just enough damage to kill an enemy and then shoot that weapon, then that's kind of it. It's about fitting the tool for the job, basically. And I even have a weapon, the charge cannon, where you can control how often it shoots to some extent. I don't expect people to be using it that precisely. I mean, maybe they will one day. But there are weapons that are designed around unleashing the damage on cue when you press the button just whenever you feel like it, basically. I was also hoping that considerations like this would give some surprises, like even for me, as the guy who designed all the weapons, just some surprises about which weapons fit which situations, and discovering all this could be kind of interesting. So I didn't want too much artificial strategy with the weapons. I didn't want to have a fakey kind of elemental damage system for a couple of reasons. I mean, I could make a video about why I don't have an elemental damage system, even though those seem to be considered quite fun. But yeah, I didn't want to have unnatural strategy like that, where it's just, this weapon doesn't do much damage because it is a flame weapon. It always felt kind of artificial to me. Whereas stuff like this, like, oh, this weapon has projectiles that are slower and easier to dodge, or this one has a faster rate of fire, so it's better for these enemies. That's all very kind of natural and numerical and visible in what happens. So I'd much rather have this natural feeling strategy than a sort of artificial rock, paper, scissors system that you have to learn about separately. One way to think about waste is how long you spend in a state where you could kill the enemy in principle if you were able to shoot, but your rate of fire just hasn't allowed you to shoot it yet. So if you shoot a bullet and you get rid of like 99% of the enemy's health, but you can't shoot another one for a second, that's like almost a full second where if you had a higher rate of fire, the enemy would already be dead, but you don't, so in practice you're waiting for most of an extra second. That's where rate of fire functions as something like a damage update rate for your enemies. If the damage doesn't update often enough, they'll be in situations where they kinda could be dead, but they're just not yet. I haven't studied it extensively, but I think waste is very similar to opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is kind of important, but it can be very tough to measure. Because I think you shouldn't count waste as equal to damage either. If you waste 50 damage, that isn't the same thing as kind of losing 50 damage. It's a bit weird. I mean, I said it was measurable, but at the same time the effects are kind of harder to measure. There's aspects of it that are measurable. I've said for a while now, waste is the ultimate luxury. So if you have a weapon that's very damaging, chances are you are wasting lots of damage on enemy after enemy. Like you might be killing a bunch of little cockroaches with a mighty sword or something, wasting lots of damage. But at the same time, that's almost good news because it just means your sword is powerful. It's like being rich and wasting some money. You know, when you're rich, you can afford to waste money. That's almost good news. It's almost a side effect of something good. So, like I say, waste is the ultimate luxury, and in a way, it would be a mistake to try and look for the least wasteful weapons, because those are quite possibly also the least powerful weapons. Anyway, that is most of my musings on waste, and I don't really have any advice to go along with it exactly. I'm just saying that waste is there. It is almost inevitably a thing when you design almost any kind of video game weapon that's based on doing a certain amount of damage on a certain amount of health, and you can't really avoid it, and the best thing to do really is embrace it and think of it as something that's a little bit interesting and makes your game a little bit more textured and complicated. Myself, I'm hoping that the different amounts of waste on different weapons in Super Space Galaxy is going to come out with little strategic possibilities that even I didn't think of, because it's a bunch of numbers kind of playing around and doing their thing. Anyway, so that's everything on waste. There'll probably be a few more videos on weapons, and I will see you guys in the next video. Most indie game devs never finish their game. Why? No structure, no accountability, and no support. That's why I'm opening 5 private coaching spots to help devs get unstuck and finally finish their game. Message me game plan in my Discord and let's chat.